What's up, everybody? Welcome to the 53rd tutorial in the zombie game tutorial series. And in this tutorial, pretty much we literally almost finished building the game engine. We just have a few things that are left. And those two things is pretty much the, It's the, It's the UI, or the user interface, like the buttons and the labels and all that stuff. And we also have the particle system, or a particle effect, to create a particle effect, pretty much. So yeah, and possibly in the future we might look at GPU rendering, but right now we just left with two modules so that we can actually finishing the development of this game, and hopefully later on we can make it a multiplayer game. So yeah, so currently this is what we have so far. This is what we have so far. Let me just mute this. And yeah. Some reason seems to be some sort of crash. Yeah, so this is what we have currently. So later on we might need to, add some UI, some user interface. We might need to add buttons for the menu, because currently our menu is just like press enter to continue. And yeah, we might need to add, a progress bar for the loading of levels, and a health bar, and other UI components. So in this video, we're simply going to be creating the frameworks for that. This is some sort of error key, or some exception, which pretty much says that the array is the array index out of bounds, which pretty much means we pressed a key that is out of our key range. That's not 256, but it doesn't really matter because our keyboard WASD is within the range of 256. But we can always increase that if you're if you're super HD, if you're super I forgot it. If you're super OCD, OCD. If you're super OCD. So anyways, actually I created a package called jcodes game object.ui. I can actually delete it. So I can create it on screen with you guys. Oh, what am I doing? Okay. Okay, so we can go back to the top-down zombie game.main. Inside game object, the graphics. Inside the graphics, you can just simply create a new package, and I'll simply name this UI. And inside this package, we're going to create a new Java class, and I'll simply call this a UI component. And so with the UI component, first of all, we're gonna have a few different things. Everyone, when the mouse is hovering over the UI component, so that we can, highlight the component to show that it's about to be selected. And we can create states for a way to know if a component is selected. We're gonna have to integrate it with mouse input and all that stuff. And so pretty much anyways, let's just do the basic stuff for now. So first thing I want to do is to make this extend the game object, because we're going to be rendering this inside a scene. Implement all the abstract methods and simply make UI component scene. So we can just make it, Yeah. So yeah, and we can just have these few basic stuff. So the first thing that a UI component will have its width, and I think we already have the width and height variables inside a game object. And I think, yeah, we're probably gonna have a list of UI components for child components because UI can be nested, but we can do that in the future. Anyways, yeah, so that's not really important right now. Okay, we're gonna have a few things. First of all, we're gonna need the background color. Background color, and this is going to be a color. And let's just import this. We're gonna have a background color, and we're probably gonna have a foreground color, or I'll just simply call it text color if the UI renders text. And after this, we're probably going to have, a highlight color. Yeah, a highlighted color, or mouse over. I simply call it mouse over for simplicity. Mouse over color. And I think this is it for now for the colors and all that. And yeah, we also might have the disabled color. Disabled color. So yeah, sure thing. So yeah, actually, what is it called? Inside the game objects, I want to, make a few changes. Not changes, an addition. I want to, be able to have the ability to disable and enable a game object. So in here, I'll just create a protected Boolean disabled, and I'll simply set it equals to false by default, so that I can switch on and off. I can switch on game objects, and yeah. So, and pretty much inside the update object, and yeah. So pretty much what I want to do is I simply want to say, if the game object is disabled, and I simply want to return, which means that I will not continue updating. I'll just exit out, copy this, and do the same thing for the render. Where is the render? Okay, here's the render. Wow. If disabled, then we return. Perfect. So I think that's about it in here. Protected. Okay, so it's protected. I need to get some getters and setters. So okay, get disabled. Wow. Let me just left click because I'm kind of lazy. Insert code, getter, and both getter and setter, and for disabled. And I think that's great. So yeah, so now we can go ahead and close it. Actually, you don't need to close it, you can just leave it open. So, and inside here, the UI components. Okay, we have the disabled color, the mouse over, and whatever. Cool. So the first thing we kind of need to do is, we want to, have to draw like the stuff that goes behind the scenes. So first of all, let me actually remove this. Remove the render, because we're going to be rendering inside the child components. We're not going to be actually rendering right now. And let me make this class abstract. So abstract class UI component. Cool. So yeah, and also I'm going to have one more thing. I'm going to have an image. Actually, we don't need to have an image in here. This is just a basic component. So that's cool. So now what we need to add is a few more things. Like we need to add the mouse over function and the mouse pressed and all that stuff. So yeah, cool. So first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna add public. No, public. Okay, whatever. It actually can be public. Public abstract. No, not public. It's gonna be protected. Protected abstract void mouse hover and we can have protected and abstract void mouse pressed. So yeah, pretty much these two events are gonna kind of like trigger whenever our mouse kind of hovers hovers on top of whenever a mouse hovers on top of this UI component. So yeah, and when we press it, it's gonna trigger this. So yeah, so I think that's about it. And inside the update method, we also kind of need to, add functionality for this. So the first thing that I want to do is to check if the mouse is currently hovering over this. So I'll create a few things: float x, mx for the mouse x, and my for the mouse y. And I'll simply make mx is equals to, for the collision, check for the detection, check if the, what is it called? If the mouse is currently intersecting the current grid box. So yeah, so inside the game object, I think, do we have a get bounds component? Okay, we don't have. So currently what I want to do is inside the game object, I want to have, okay, actually let me not do that. Simply, okay, so what I'm gonna do right now, let me just not speak a lot of gibberish. Let me remove all the stuff that I don't need. And the first thing that I want to do is I want to create a protected rectangle. I'm gonna use this for collision detection, or for detecting whether the mouse is inside the rectangle, is inside the component. So rectangle, and I'll simply call this bounds. And in here, I'll simply say bounds. No. I'll just leave it like that. And yeah, so in here, whenever we update, the first thing that I want to do is to, set the bounds. So I'll simply say bounds is equals to new rectangle. And we're going to take 4 parameters: an x and a y coordinate, and a width and height. So I'm going to be taking position.x, a position.y, and a width and a height. And we kind of need to cast this to an integer. And yeah, now we have our bounds. So now what we need to do is simply, check for collision. So I can simply say if bounds.intersect, no, not intersects, what am I saying? If bounds.contains point P. So I can simply say this: if bounds.contains this, and instead of saying mx, yeah, we can simply do it like this. If bounds contains that, we simply want to, call mouse hover, kind of. And actually, to make it even better, we can simply pass the positions, and yeah, so I can simply pass, what is it called? The mouse X? And actually, let's just leave it like that. And the next thing is we need to, add event detection for mouse pressed. So this could be a little bit tricky. But guys, don't worry, I got you. So yeah, so the first thing that I want to do is to, go back to the original mouse input and change a few things. And yeah, so what is it called? I just want to create a new boolean, public static boolean is pressed, or is currently pressed. Is pressed, and I'll simply default it to false. Or I can simply make it is first pressed. It doesn't. Let me just not complicate it. Let me just simply make it simple. And so what happens is that whenever we're pressing on the When we're pressing on the mouse, when we're calling this button pressed, we simply set it to true, and whenever we release, what is it? Mouse pressed, and mouse release, we're simply gonna reset it to false. So yeah, simple. So first of all, I'll simply say pressed is equal to true, and inside the mouse released, I'll simply say is pressed is then equals to false. Cool. Now after doing this, capital. So that's cool. So after doing that, we can simply go back to the to the UI component. To the UI component, and inside here I can simply say if mouse input dot is pressed, then you can simply call mouse pressed. And I think our problem is kind of fixed right now. So yeah, so currently we can go ahead and create our component manager. Apparently I'm supposedly receiving an error in this file. I don't know what's the error. That's the problem with NetBeans. Yeah, there's no error. So now we can go ahead and create a UI manager component. So yeah, so the first thing I'm going to do is, when we enter here inside the UI component, I'll create a new Java class, and I'll simply call this UI Manager. So this is kind of going to be managing all our UI and the updating and the whatever. So yeah, so the first thing I'm going to make this extend the game object. And implement all the abstract methods, blah blah blah. Cool. And yes, I can simply UI manager, and you can initialize it like that. We don't need these. We actually kind of do, but yeah. And we don't actually have to have a render method. Yeah, who cares? So yeah, so the first thing that I want to have is I want to have a method called add object. So public void, not add object, what am I saying? Add UI. Public void add UI component. And we're going to simply take in a UI component. And we want to also have a public void remove UI component. And we're also going to take in a UI component. And let's go ahead and create an array list, because the UI manager is going to be managing a bunch of UIs, a bunch of UI components. So yeah, and the UI manager is going to be managing all these components, all these UI components inside a scene that we're currently rendering to the gamer. So yeah, let's go ahead and create the list of the UI. So I'm going to use an array list. Components is equals to, let me just leave it like that, and yeah, add import, and inside the init I can simply say components is equals to new array list, and we're good. And inside the add, we simply want to say UI components dot add UI component, and we're good. The same thing for here. We simply want to do the same thing for removing UI components dot remove component, and this should be good. So yeah, now what we simply need to do is to simply update every single UI component here, and yeah, and I'm simply going to say for Yeah, and yeah, so here I simply, be updating every single UI component. So I simply say UI component dot update object. Instead of calling update, I'll simply call update object. So yeah, I have to do the same thing for the rendering. So for each UI component, I simply want to say UI components, and I'll simply say UI component dot render object. Dot render object, because we're trying to render this object, and I'm simply going to pass in graphics. So this is a kind of type of a for loop to loop through, what is it called, to kind of loop through lists. That's only meaning that if the list is thread safe, meaning that you cannot change the list when we're iterating through them. Yeah, it doesn't make a lot of sense, but yeah, we can use these pretty much bottom lines. We can use these for loops to kind of iterate through every single through lists, pretty much array lists, linked lists, and all those other types of lists, or dictionaries, or hash maps. So yeah, so cool. Now that we have this set up, we also need to do the same thing for the inits. Actually, we don't need to initialize this here. We can simply initialize this whenever we call the add. So I can simply say call component dot init object. Wow. Init object, and yeah, it's good-ish for now. It seems working. It seems to be working fine. So yeah, so let's go ahead and create our test UI. And inside here, actually, one more thing that I needed to fix, actually I just thought about it right now, is instead of saying position.x, when we're checking for the bounds, we want to use the get on screen coordinates function. So vector2f position will equals to what? Get coordinates on screen, because remember the mouse isn't, is not transformed to the word. This input manager to get mouse x is not transformed to to the word coordinates. So yeah, we're just gonna be changing the current game object, the current UI component's position to the screen position. So yeah. So instead of using position.x, I'll simply change this to pause. And the same thing here, I'll simply change this to pause. And actually means I must have to take away width divided by 2. Reason being is that, what is it called? Using this will kind of, center our position, if you know what I mean. Oh, for the Y is actually height, my bad. So yeah, this should be working great. So we can go ahead and create our test. What is it called? Our test button, our test component. So inside here, I'll simply create a new a new Java class, and I'll simply call this UI button. And it's gonna be ugly right now, but we don't really care. We're just trying to test something. So yeah, so the first thing I want to do is I want to make sure this extends a UI component. And after that, we can implement all the abstract methods. So we can have mouse hover, pressed, and all that nice stuff. And I'll kind of need to have a constructor, so I'll just simply create a UI button and call super, and we need to set the width and the height. So for the width of the button, I don't know, I'll just give it something like, 200, and the height, I'll give it something like, 80. Yeah, let me just give it something like 80. And for the position, inside our world, I'd like it, because 0 and 0 will be center, will be the center of our screen. Let me just give it position 0 and 0 is equals to 0 and 0. Wow, new vector. Actually, I can simply say position.x is equal to 0, and position.y is also equal to 0. And yeah, and then on mouse hover, I can simply display that we hovered. And here I can simply say that's out. Simply display that we pressed. And on the render, this is where we want to, render the object. So we can simply say renderer dot fill rect. So when I fill rect graphics position and what's this? Let me check this. It's okay, width and height. So I can fill rect graphics position. I can simply go with width and height. And wow, I think I need to convert this to a float. Oh, I need to convert this to an integer. What am I doing? Yeah. And we can simply cast height into int, and I think we're good. So first, yeah, I think we're good for now. And so this is our testing button, kinda. So inside, so we already have that, and let's go ahead into the into the scene class and add our UI manager to the scene. So inside here, I'll have a protected UI manager. Protected, wow, can't even spell right today. Protected UI manager, and import that, and I'll simply call it UI manager. And inside the unit, where is the unit? Start scene. Okay, we don't have an init, we have a start scene. So yeah. So after doing all of this, I can simply initialize the UI manager. UI manager dot actually is equals to new UI. Wow, why can't I do spelling today? Seriously, I can't spell for anything really. Create UI manager. Wow, let me look at the constructor. Oh, we're gonna take in a scene, and I'll simply pass in this. Cool, because this is a scene. So yeah, and now all we kind of need to do is add UI components. So first of all, I'm just simply gonna be importing the UI button. So yeah, so first of all, I'll simply say UI button. Just import that, and I'll simply write btn is equals to new UI button. This is just for testing purposes, by the way. And yeah, I can simply say UI manager dot add component. Actually, we don't want to do this inside the, I don't want to do this inside dot add component. Let me just finish this first. And add UI component btn. So actually, I don't want to add this into the root scene because it'll be weird having this inside the scene. We want to add it into like a specific scene. So I'll go into, let's say, the welcome. Goodness Lord. The welcome scene, and inside here I can simply add it inside the init method and paste this. Okay, we're gonna import that, and yeah, everything looks fine. So now let's go ahead and test this out. So let's run, and I'll just be crossing my fingers, and we have a problem. So let me look at it. So the error is saying that what is it called? It's saying that test.ui component is null, so I guess I didn't create the UI component. Oh, I need to call init. So inside the scene, when I kind of create, in fact, since it's what is it called? It's the UI manager. It's not gonna be the end of the world if I simply call init right over here. So yeah, that should fix it. And yeah, cool. Stuff is running, but where is my button? I don't see a button. Maybe that's supposed to be the button. And why on earth do I have a very low frame rate? Let me try and fix this. Okay, I figured out the problem was we currently have the UI manager in here, but we're not updating it and initializing and doing all the stuff for it. So yeah, so when updating, I want the UI manager to be the first, to be updating. So I'll simply call update object in here. And after updating, and when it comes to rendering, I want the UI manager to be the last thing to be rendered because I want it to be at the top of everything. So I'll simply call UI manager dot render object right over here. Control Z. Render object. Good. Now when we run this, we're getting another error. So I managed to figure out the problem of why it's crashing, it's not working. It's because inside here, the constructor that we're currently using for our, for our UI component, let me just open up real quickly. UI component. Anyways, so yeah, let me just go back to the game object. The constructor that we're using for UI components, it's what is it called? It's this constructor, and we're not creating a renderer in that constructor. So what I want to do is simply copy this and paste it into all the constructors. And yeah, sure, now it's fine now when we run this. Hopefully it's working. Okay, another problem. Now pointer cannot invoke blah 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 because this scene is now. Oh yeah, so yeah, because seriously, okay, we cannot do this for this constructor because we are not passing any scene. So let me just remove this. And yeah, now it should be working properly. And yeah, as you can see, everything seems to be working fine. And we hovered. And yeah, stuff seems to be working fine. So we can go back to the UI button. And let me change a few things. Where is the UI button? So let me just go back to UI button. And then, okay, let me just remove this wall. And yeah, now let's run this. Okay, why is it? Okay, let me run this. Okay, so I get it. It seems to be working. So as you can see, remember we kind of like, what is it called? We gave the position of an x of 0 and a y of 0 and a width of 200 and a height of 80. So yeah, so it's at x 0 and 0 and 200 and 800. So, and whenever we hover over the button, we can simply see that it says we hovered. And when we press, as you can see, it says we pressed. So that's cool. So yeah, we can actually change a few things. Like what we can do is you can simply say graphics.set color. Okay, so first thing actually, when you go back to the UI component, to the UI, where is the UI component? Well, okay, here. When you go to the UI component, we have the color, background color, text color, mouse over color, and disabled color. I also want to add a current background color. Background, wow. Background color. And yeah, so what I want to do is to initialize all of this actually. So so what I want to do is simply give a default value for the background color to, I don't know, color dot, I don't know. Let's give it a color dot. I'm on a farm, guys. Apologies. So yeah. So let's give this a background color of something like I don't know, color dot. Let's why am I calling this as a function? So yeah, after creating the current background color, so we can just add a few customizations. What we can simply do is can assign values to the background color. So background color, I'll simply make that equals to color.white, color.gray. Let me just make it gray. And I can simply set the, what's it called? Mouse over color to equals to background color.brighter or darker, it doesn't really matter. So I can go with darker or brighter. Let me just go darker. And mouse over color, and then disabled color to, I don't know, maybe. Disabled color is equals to new color or something like, I don't know, 223, 223, 223. This is just a random number. I don't know. It could work out, it could not. And yeah. And I can simply set current background color is equals to, so the current background color is equals to background color. So after this now, what we can do is that whenever we, so inside the update, what we can do is you can say if let's say if disabled, okay, we can't actually do this inside the update because if it's disabled, then it is disabled, it won't work. So, honestly, yeah, okay. If disabled, then we can simply set current background color is equals to disabled color. And if what is it called? And inside, whenever we hover, we can simply say current background color. And actually, the first thing we do is simply set current background color is equals to, background color. And whenever we hover, we want to set the background color to the hover color. So we can simply say background color is equals to hover, not mouse hover. It's going to be equal to mouse over. Wow, I need to rename this. Refactor, rename. Instead of over to hover. So yeah, and then we simply set it to mouse over color, and it should be working properly. Now, when we run this, okay, why is this still not working? I have no clue. Oh, okay, yeah. So we need to enter the UI button, and instead of setting graphics.set color to text color, I want to say graphics.set color to current background color. And yeah, so now when we run this, we have that as our main color, and whenever we hover, okay, something clearly isn't right. Let's see. Let me go back to the UI button. Actually, I want to make this protected. Current background color is equal to background color. Okay, instead of, let's just make this white and let's try this again. Okay, now it's much more clear. But once we are hovering over, it doesn't want to go back. So let's try and fix that. Let me just, oh, I see the problem is that in here we're setting the background color to that. So instead of setting the background color, we need to set the current background color instead. So yeah, now when we run this, now as you can see when the mouse is over, we kind of change colors and something brand new, something amazing is happening. And when we pressed, and yeah, so we can go ahead and remove this mouse hover. And so this is pretty much the basic foundation for our UI. From here, we can make our buttons and our everything pretty much. So yeah, I think that's it for the video. Actually, what we can do here is just, we can change it back to gray and see how it works. Okay, so we created our button, and yeah, actually, yeah, before we're done, we can see, let's try and modify it to like the position. So we can change it from 0, 0 to something like 50 on the X and 100 on the Y, or not 1,000, 100. And yeah, we have something, it's kind of offsetted. And what's it called? And when we stretch our screen, it still works. When we enter full screen mode, wait, there's small, oh, yeah, there's still one more problem. Yeah. Before we're not yet done, there's one more problem. The current implementation we have doesn't work for, full screen mode. So we kind of need to fix that. So yeah, let's go ahead and fix that. So the thing is, our current width right now, this width is 200, assuming that, what is it called? We're in 800 by 600 mode, like we're in small screen mode. But the moment we, enter full screen mode, we kind of need to change the width and the height. Because yeah, we're not going to be using 200 because it's going to be a bit stretched. So yeah, let's go ahead and fix that. So yeah, actually it's not a big problem. We can simply go back to the UI component, and in here, instead of using just width, we can, we could scale width by the change. The change. We could multiply width by the factor of the change. So how do we get that factor? So what I want to do is to simply inside the update, I want to create x. So I'll create a float and simply put it x factor and y factor. And yeah, I'll make x factor is equals to top down zombie game dot display dot buffer width, and then we're gonna divide this by the aspect ratios width. Top down zombie game dot width, and the same thing for the y. I'm gonna make this equals to top down zombie game dot display dot buffer height, and then I'm simply going to divide this by top down zombie game dot height. Yeah, and then instead of just simply passing down width, what we can do is we can multiply this by x factor, and for the height you can multiply it by y factor. And yeah, hopefully it's still working right now. Okay, it's still working properly. And when we enter full screen mode, it's having some few problems. Okay, yeah, sure. So after adding the X, after adding provisions for the X factor, we can see that the hovering is, it's working properly in small screen, but in large screen, it's actually not, detecting properly. So yeah, we also need to add the same thing. What we did for the what is it called? For the small screen, we just need to multiply. Oh, what am I doing? Control Z. We just need to multiply the X by the X factor again, multiply this by X factor, and we also want to multiply this by Y factor. After doing this, then when we enter full screen, we can still, it's still working properly. But the other thing is, let's say we want to have in-game UI components. So yeah, what I went ahead and, did off screen is that I create inside the game, the gameplay scene, I just added the same button. So yeah, so the same UI button, and it's the same position X and Y, and yeah. So right now when we enter the, the gameplay mode, it's that, as you can see, the button is there. It's just that it's now, at the center of the screen, and everything's working properly. And also when we try to move, as you can see, whenever I try to move, the button also moves. So we need to fix that. So yeah, so how we're going to be doing that is that we're going to be entering the renderer, and I'll create the same function. I'll just simply copy this and paste this here, and public void fill rect, and I'll simply call this fill rect on screen. So yeah, so what we're going to be doing here is simply going to be getting rid of this dot position. We're just going to be getting rid of all of these, and yeah, we're just going to be getting rid of that. And when we run it now, it's still, it's still over here, it's still at the bottom. That's because of I don't know why actually. Maybe it's because of this, to be honest. Let me just I know why. It's because, what is it? When you go to the UI component, it's, what is it called? We didn't actually change the rendering call, because we're calling render.fillRect instead of calling render.fillRect on screen. So yeah. Now we get something that's a little bit like this, and we kind of need to fix that. So what is it called? So I'll simply just go to the UI component, and I'll get rid of, no, whoa, hold up. Yeah, we kind of need to get rid of this. So I think we'll simply just go to the renderer, and I'll remove this and this. And we have something that looks like this. So yeah, now when we enter, what is it called? When we enter, we have the UI sticking up there at the top, but the mouse hover thingy isn't working. Mouse hovering and the mouse pressed isn't working. So we kind of need to, fix that. Yeah, so the reason why when we enter play mode and, it's not working is because it's still using the, the world coordinates to, do the collision detection and checking for, So yeah, so in fact, we can go to the UI component, and instead of simply saying pose.get on screen coordinates, we can, so yeah, since there's a, so instead of going with pos equals to get on screen coordinates, in fact, what we can do better is when we go to the, to the game object, and we can simply duplicate this method, and I'll create a different version for the UI components. I'll simply call this get on screen coordinates. I don't know, get on screen transform coordinates. I don't know really. literally running out of words. Get on screen transform coordinates, and in here we're simply not going to be using any of this. I'll not be using any of this because this is dependent on the world. We don't want to be using that. So I actually don't need the camera. We can remove this. And yeah, what is it? So here we kind of, we do the same thing for calculating the x offset with the buffered width and the x pos whatever thingy. So yeah, now we can go back to the, to the UI component. And instead of saying get on screen coordinates, I can simply say get on screen UI coordinates. Yeah, simply call it UI. Yeah, that's actually a good idea, good name. So I'll simply go back here and rename this from transform to UI. And then after doing that, I can simply remove this X factor thingy and all of this. I can remove the height and the X factor, and hopefully it should be working like a charm. And as you can see, it is working in small screen mode, and when you enter full screen mode, it's still working properly. And this is the moment of truth. Let's try and enter play mode. And as you can see, it's working. So yeah, finally we have our, we have our UI working, our UI components. So this is pretty much, it's a crude version of the UI. Yeah, we can actually, we can make this better. In the future, we can have, we can have this like a pause button. We can put a pause icon right at the top, and then we can have UI element to, represent weapons, which weapon we're on, and other on-screen stuff, other buttons and menu items and all that stuff. So yeah, that's it for this video, guys. Make sure you subscribe and you like. So yeah, and in the next video, we're going to start, creating the HUD or the HUD. Pretty much we're going to be, we're going to get started working on the things like the life bar and other small components here, guys. So yeah, peace. Screen stuff, other buttons and menu items and all that stuff. So yeah, that's it for this video, guys. Make sure you subscribe and you like. So yeah, and in the next video, we're going to start, creating the HUD or the HUD. Pretty much we're going to be, we're going to get started working on the things like the life bar and other small components here, guys. So yeah, peace.